It's time for To The Last Drop podcast with Liam Delcalm and Brenden Nell.
Welcome back to The Last Drop. I'm Brenden Nell, and with me, as always, is Liam Delcalm. We've got a bumper-packed show for you guys. It's including a very exclusive interview with the Sharks CEO, Eduard, Coetzee, who tells us exactly and answers what's going on at the Sharks at the moment and why they're sitting last on the UFC and what they're going to do about it. So keep listening for that. They'll be coming up in a few minutes. But first, Liam, we were both in Durban this week. First of all, welcome. And how was your Durban trip?
Thank you, Brenden. The Durban trip was a little different, but certainly weather-wise. Overcast the whole time, not as humid as you kind of expect Durban to be. But all in all, a good trip. I mean, it was most informative as guests of the Sharks. We probably need to be upfront about that. So, from a work perspective, it certainly was a worthwhile exercise, and obviously, a match that it pitted two sides that. I won't say we're desperate. I think the one side was more desperate than the other. But in the final analysis, I think the one team that has been playing together as a team for longer, that team prevailed.
Yeah, it was hard not to feel a bit sorry for the Sharks. And yes, we were down there. The Sharks invited us for Media Weekend. We went and listened to them about all their plans for the season, and you'll be hearing some of that in Edward's interview. But yeah, the weather didn't play along. We were supposed to play bowls on Saturday morning. I think we're probably quite fortunate we didn't, because we'd embarrass ourselves, or some of us would.
Yeah.
But yeah, the game was good, and it was in cooler conditions than we normally used to this time of year in Durban. I just think the Stormers are in a really, really good place at the moment, and you can see that by the way they play for each other. And even with the likes of Manie Lebok and Damian Willems out, they still had way too much firepower for the Sharks.
Yeah, you just get the sense that the succession planning, the way that some of the younger players have been incorporated into that squad, they've completely bought into the ethos of the side. Certainly, the systems the Stormers have been operating with the last while, that's been bedded down properly in that squad. So when you replace even a seasoned Springbok with somebody who's performed well at the highest level, if you replace a player like that, there seems to be a seamless transition. So that was quite evident in that match again. The Stormers seem to be able to weather those storms. I mean, we've seen it now against certainly in derby matches where they've built up a solid results column against the other South African franchises, but also on the road, as we saw in the Champions Cup when they played Stade Francais. Also with a bit of a weakened side, and you know what? There was no huge drop in performance at all. So yeah, you're right. I mean, I think they've got very good momentum going for them.
Yeah, I mean, even in that game against the Tigers in the European Cup, I mean, the Champions Cup, they sent a second string side and almost came back with a win there. So. Yeah, there's some real good things happening. And you often see it with sides where the culture is good and they're successful, that it doesn't matter about the next guy coming in. He can be 18, 19 years old. He'll step up, and that's where every coach wants to be. The contrast was, of course, John Plumtree, who you almost felt the pressure is getting to him a bit. I don't think it's that bad yet that he'd give up, but you certainly had the idea that he could certainly use a win.
Well, I think the important thing there is that he has the backing of the people higher up the food chain. So they obviously decided to make the coaching change last season or last year, and they obviously have to give him time. But the problem now is, of course, I mean, 10 matches with just one win, it becomes a little problematic. But even that, with that said, he still has the support from the people high above. And they've said as much. It's not just, that you've heard whispers. They actually quite happy to say, that they still believe they've got the right people in those key areas to turn the ship for them. So at least he's got that. He doesn't have to worry about that in the media term. What he needs to concern himself with now is just bedding down those systems as quickly as he can and start getting wins. And as much as I say bed down the systems and make that his focus, you almost got the sense last weekend that you need to get a win at all costs. So even if you need to abandon your grand plans in terms of the way you want your team to play, maybe forget about those frills. Just knuckle down to the job at hand. In other words, if you have to win ugly, win ugly.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's just, I mean, they actually got a lot more success in that game when they started playing more direct and away from the game that he wants them to play. So, I mean, you're right there. You just feel that that there is quite a bit of pressure building there, even though it might not be from the bosses, just from everywhere around. And teams tend to feel that quite often, and often that makes them try harder, and then things don't go well. But I mean, their next game is the Lions, another team who's also started off extremely well in the season, and the Sharks certainly can beat them, but they could just as easily lose that game depending on which Lions team pitches up as well. They were rather disappointing we had one eye on the TV watching that from the Kings Park press box. They were rather disappointing in the way they played against the Bulls. I mean, I think Jake White was quite right when he said afterwards they didn't really go past three phases at any stage. And the fact that it was 5-3 at halftime was mostly because of the Bulls' handling errors more than it was what the Lions were doing.
Yeah, I think the Bulls stunted them very well up front, and not just up front. I think the Bulls stopped them from playing, but you also just got the sense that it just wasn't the Lions there. I mean, they were probably as blunt as I've seen them. And yeah, you're right. We watched the game from afar. We weren't at Ellis Park. So, I think the Lions have taken a few steps back, to be fair, over the last few weeks. And I think that performance would have been a concerning one. I mean, when they played the Bulls at Loftus, and they were on the wrong end of a tight match in terms of the result. And they were still quite optimistic going into last week's game, but I mean, they hardly fired a shot. So they'll be disappointed, and there may be some key areas that will invite closer scrutiny as they go forward. I mean, that game at Ellis Park will become a big one for the Sharks. Well, it's certainly one that they can target now. I mean, if they look at that Lions performance, they'll probably come to Joburg thinking, well, you know what, this is where things can turn.
Yeah, and I think I mean the Sharks also, the one thing about them we must remember is that they have got the Challenge Cup that they're still in, and they could very easily go on and win that. It's maybe a bit long to say it's a cup. Yeah, they've got 4 rounds still to go, but they've got the firepower.
They're playing away in the at the business end of the tournament, so that's the obstacle.
Yeah. So I mean, if they win that, they'll get they're not going to get an entry into the Champions Cup on league performances, but they still could sneak in the back door on that one. So there's definitely incentive for them, and obviously the derbies always there's incentive in terms of the teams, just pride and all that. I'm a bit worried about the Lions. I think one thing I see sneaking into their game plan a lot more, was exactly what hampered them last season, is that they haven't really rotated that much. They rotated in the beginning of the season and for the Challenge Cup where they sent other teams up. But when it comes to these big games, they tend to play their best sort of 15 every single time. And Jake pointed out they'd used 31 players. The Bulls have used 43 already this season. That's quite a big difference on the workload of the teams as well.
And that goes back to the Lions contracting model, I suppose, or the business model. They simply don't have the depth that you see at the Bulls and the Sharks and the Stormers. So at some point, it's one of those things where you kind of feel sorry for them, because those games that are tight that they need to win to sustain their challenge, they just don't have the manpower, to sustain an 80-minute effort over a couple of months. In other words, you go on like a 6-7 game unbeaten run. That's a tall order for a team like the Lions in European competition. So when they have these close defeats, you kind of feel for them, because it's tight margins that will set them back and sort of make them move backwards.
Yeah. Of course, there's the other news. The next round for them is the Sharks and the Bulls play the Stormers in probably one of the biggest derbies that we're probably going to see this year. And already they're talking about 20,000 tickets at the time we're recording have been sold, and they're hoping to fill up Loftus. So let's hope they do. And speaking of crowds, I just want to say, I mean, that the Lions found a way to get people to this park, it seems. Give the guys free entry with a student card and a free beer if you enter with your student card. They suddenly got quite a crowd there, which was quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, stadiums need to think out of the box, and if you incentivize fans that way, then that's a fantastic way of doing it. That of course is a lot better, even if you have to part with a bit of cash. Getting more people in just creates a different energy, a different vibe, and hopefully it even helps the team perform. It didn't help much last Saturday on that front, unfortunately for them. But you slowly but surely want people to get back to Ellis Park, because I still believe once you're inside that stadium, it's a fantastic arena.
Yeah.
As far as Loftus is concerned, for that big game against the Stormers, look, they want to sell the thing out to 50,000 fans. The record, I think, is 41,500. And you're right, they are on course as we speak, and we still a long way from kickoff. So I was also told that Pretoria-based fans they kind of leave it late. So there may be a big surge come Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week to get them to the 50,000 mark. But at the moment, it looks like they may very well be on track, to get a big sellout. And of course, they've got, apart from the big derby game that they're hosting, there are other little attractions to get people to attend.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if you gave away on the Lions part, you gave away one free beer, I can almost guarantee that those same students probably bought one or two more while they were there as well.
Yeah. I mean, who's going to just sit there with one beer? I mean, it's not.
Especially on a hot Joburg afternoon like it was.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other news that came out this week as well is the Springbok alignment squad, which caught me a bit by surprise. I mean, they have these alignment camps 4 or 5 times a year. And what caught me by surprise wasn't so much that the fact that they're having the alignment camp, was more, I suppose, that they don't normally name the guys going to the alignment camps. We see media reports here and there, of who's going to the camp, but normally officially they don't name them. And the huge excitement, especially on social media, that some people almost felt like this was the next Springbok group. And it's obviously quite a bit away from that. These alignment camps serve a purpose. They're there to introduce players to the Springboks and get the coaches talk to them. And so that it's not like a first day at school type thing when you get selected for the Springboks. But it just surprised me that people sort of went a bit overboard. Rassie was quite clear beforehand that he was going to bring some youngsters in with a view on 2027. And that's what he did. And suddenly a lot of people were thinking, wow, we got a whole bunch of new Springboks coming in.
Yeah, look, it's one way of getting onto the front foot and getting their message across. So if there were players that they were looking at that are blipping on the radar, doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get selected. But if you're blipping on the radar, that's the invalidation of your efforts. The other way, or the other thing that you then do is, if there are players that are quietly going into retirement that will no longer be part of the Springbok squad, that's another way of sort of softening that blow. But if there are a couple of omissions, in other instances, there are players that may not fit into their plans. A player that may catch the headlines every week for the right reasons, but may not sort of fit into the Bok mold, if you like. It's another way of sort of subtly getting that message across that maybe that player is not, sort of not Bok material. But I think it serves a purpose in this instance. They certainly didn't, in announcing the names that are going to attend the camp, overplay it. They just said, this is the list of players. They then just said, these players are attached to these teams. So there's no statistics around that particular player, that he's that old, he's got so many caps or whatever. Not in the way they build it up for when there is an actual squad announcement. So it was quite muted in that sense. So nobody should mistake it for the announcement of a Springbok squad. But I think it's their way of maybe getting the message out there. This is more or less what we intend doing, and doing it in a subtle way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I know, I mean, I don't know, you didn't mention the players, but I mean, the obvious ones is Dion Ferreira that was left out. And I think at 37 years old, I don't think there'll be too many people that would be surprised if he doesn't make the box squad after the World Cup. The other one, obviously, that a lot of people mentioned was Hakjiva Daimani, who's had a great season, but plays a very different game to what the Springboks currently play. And his strengths on attack or maybe not matched at times by his strengths on defense. And the Bok coaches obviously want to do something different. And let's be honest, we've got a plethora of loose forwards in this country. We've probably got a dozen to pick from at any period anyway. So there's always going to be somebody who's going to be unlucky. I thought the Cameron Honeycomb selection was invitation was sort of almost a tip of the cap to say, well, don't engage any of this Welsh talk of your grandfather being Welsh, etc. We are quite interested in you, but I think also when you look at that squad, when you look at some of the youngsters that are there, Jan-Hendrik Wessels and Marnus van der Merwe, for instance, the two hookers. Jan-Hendrik Wessels could very well be a Springbok in 4 years' time. But saying that, I don't think anybody expects him to replace Malcolm Marx or Bongi Mbonambi at this moment. So there's a lot of that as well. And there's a lot of the coaches getting that private time with players to tell them, this is what we expect of you, this is what we want from you, and this is where you have to improve. So, as you say, not too much to get excited about. Although, I mean, the fact that your name is mentioned tells you that the Bok coaches have been talking about you.
Yeah, it's a simple thing then, especially for the new guys. It means that you've been noticed. It's you're blipping on their radar. You're showing that that's not like you you off screen. You have been noticed. So, but it's nothing more than that. So but it certainly also then gives you a chance to familiarize yourself with the Bok ways, the way that the ways that they do things in. And it's a wonderful opportunity to get that bit of you as a rugby player and your development to get that kind of head start before you go into a test match week if you get selected.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think it should serve as a motivation for all those players. You're on the radar now. So now you just have to continue playing and continue knocking that door down. And if you missed it, well, that should serve as a motivation for you as well. But I mean, there have been cases in the past where players have been invited to alignment camps, but not necessarily made a Springbok selection. So, yeah, the onus is still very much on the player to perform over the next couple of months.
Absolutely.
One other last thing we should mention is the fact that the test against Wales has been now formally announced. So on the same day as the URC final, the Boks will play in a double header along with Barbarians against Fiji as the main match, but the Boks will play Wales in a warm-up game. So the fact that it's the same day as the URC final tells me two things. One, that obviously if there's a South African team involved, there will be none of those players in that game. And secondly, you're unlikely to have any overseas-based players unless they've completed their domestic season at that stage. So the likes of Andre Pollard won't be there. The likes of some of the Japanese players, Cheslin Colby, Jesse Krill probably won't be there. Peter-Steph du Toit. So it's going to be very much a new-look team, and it's going to be a chance for Rossi to probably blood a few players and probably experiment a little bit on that front.
I'll think of it this way. Next weekend's game at Ellis Park between the Sharks and the Lions is a wonderful opportunity for those players to get onto the front foot and get noticed, because that potentially is a big match for you.
Well, yes. I mean, Wales are Wales, so you could play a test match there. I mean, a bunch of players a couple of years ago played their first test against Wales in Washington. A bunch of them went to the World Cup and won a World Cup as well. So
only a few. There's a lot of them never resurfaced, but there's a few notable ones that did, and they did so splendidly.
Yes, I mean, Oxenchair was the one that comes to mind straight away. Yes. One that didn't go, which I thought maybe a bit unlucky with the amount of sort of lock stroke loose forwards we have in this country, is Jason Jenkins. He was in that test, and he's certainly a very good player, but obviously never got that chance as well. Erkje Snyman was there as well, if I remember right as well. Yeah, I think anyway. My memory could be a bit hazy. I am getting a bit older nowadays, so Anyway, but
Correct.
yeah, correct. You're right. We had quite a few jokes about age and things like that this weekend, so don't worry. That's it for us now for this part of it. But have a listen to our chat with Eduard.
You're with Brenden Nell and Liam Delcom on the To The Last Drop podcast.
Broadcasting from KZN, beautiful KZN, with Ed Coetzee, the CEO of the Sharks Rugby Union, Sharks Rugby Company. Sorry, let me get that right. Ed, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Thanks, Liam. It's wonderful to be here.
Lots going on. I'm sure we're not going to concentrate so much on the field, although those questions are going to come up. So let's start. It hasn't been the greatest season for the Sharks so far, and I'm sure that you guys would have wanted it to go a lot better.
Yeah, no, listen, not for a second will we ever try and paint over the cracks in the results and stuff that people are seeing, but I think our strategy to get the Sharks onto a sustainable, successful path we believe is solid, and the people we got in place are the right people. But yeah, it is frustrating that this thing doesn't kick on a bit earlier, but that's also part of sport. And I think that when you follow the process and you've got the right people that you believe, you've got to back them and make sure that we actually build this thing so we don't find ourselves in a situation like this again. But yeah, listen, from a personnel point of view, I think we're very happy that we've got a structure in place that we believe in, and now it's just to give those individuals and empower them to build something that they can be happy with.
How difficult has it been to sort of stick with the process? Because often, you suffer maybe a 1-point defeat or a 2-point defeat. I know sport is fickle, and people will have a lot of things to say after defeat. But how difficult has it been to sort of stick with the process? Because it's obviously something that you've identified that you have to do. So, to keep your eye on the ball, as it were.
Yes. I mean, obviously it has been difficult because no one likes losing. But like you just mentioned, I think we had 5 games losing 5 games with less than 3 points. And, I think you've got to then try and take the emotion out of the situation and make sure that you don't crystallize the problems that's currently manifesting, but you're actually backing the system and backing the process. And, and just, as I said, like to make sure that whatever we do now, when this thing changes, because sport has got a funny way of changing and the momentum shifts, and you get the 2-point wins and the 1-point win instead of the 1-point and 2-point losses. When you in that space, you got to realize that what you've done to get back to this and not go back to questioning the systems and the structures, and keep on growing and keep on building on something, because no one's ever perfect.
What hasn't helped you, obviously, is just the structure of the season. You've got Springboks coming back at strange times. You've got enforced rest periods. You've got now Currie Cup, where you've got to rest players for 8 weeks as well. How much of a disruption has that been to everything for you guys?
Yeah, listen, I think it's difficult, like you just mentioned. It's difficult enough to with all things equal, perform in competitions like the URC and Europe. But when you have other systemic challenges that's outside of your control, I think that is a bit of a challenge sometimes. The World Cup, I mean, the bigger picture worked out perfectly for us as a country. And I think sometimes if you're part of that ecosystem, you've got to put your own personal ambitions almost secondary to the national ones. But yeah, when you're in that moment and you're waiting for this momentum to change, it is quite lonely and it is quite a tough place. But I must admit, I'm very, very proud of how everyone, from the owners all the way through to the coaches, the staff, and the players, have actually stood together and really pulled together to drive a strategy that we believe will take us through this.
There obviously would have had to be times when the franchise exercises patience. I know with certain key appointments you've had to do that, and in this instance clearly a bit of patience is also required. I take it if you come through this that there'll be a huge amount of satisfaction that you have the right people in the right places, and it set you up, having come through adversity, that you have that assurance that you've got the right key personnel.
Yeah, listen, I think personally, and it doesn't come from a place of arrogance. I do think we already feel that we vindicated and we got the right people in place, and especially on a coaching and a rugby management side. I think Neil's done an unbelievable job to steer the ship, and even through still what is turbulent waters. I think Plum has settled in unbelievably well into a squad that he probably didn't know too many other players except the internationals, and they weren't even here. So he's done a lot of work to get to know these players, and we see the last game we had debuts for Ethan Hooker, or the last few games, Ethan Hooker, Diego Apollos, Eduard Keita. Tomorrow we got Sia Masuka. So all those players were unknown to Plum before he took over this team. So I think that it's a growth path and vindicated in those decisions. I think, as I mentioned to you guys earlier, it takes so long to build something in sport, but it literally takes one decision or one emotional moment to literally reset everything, and then you start it from scratch again. And we're not in that space, and that's where we're very, very privileged that our ownership group has been on this journey with us. They actually walk this side by side with us, which is nice, because I think as soon as you not aligned from a management, ownership, on field or field aspect, that's when the cracks can appear. But they've been really, really supportive and also excited for this thing to turn and to actually hit our straps.
I was going to say, just looking ahead, the perception outside there, and I'm going to give you a chance to correct it, is that the Sharks are the big money spenders. You guys, there's reports recently, you're breaking the bank to get Andre Estes, and there's all sorts of other players being named to come to Durban, where surely there should be an element of developing from within. Is it that? Are you guys the big spenders everyone says you are?
I think we've become a very a comfortable vehicle for agents to add 10, 20, 30% to players' contracts when they say, oh, well, the Sharks have offered X, Y, Z. Listen, we are a professional franchise. We'll always look if there's nothing in the system. We will have a player from outside, but that's not our strategy. Our strategy is now with Neil, and I think people have seen that in the way he ran a sevens program that was world beaters for a very long time, how he loves to create people and invest in people and grow them. And that'll be nothing different to the strategy at the Sharks. So just for the next year, we'll have Ethan Bester, Coetzee LaRue, Bradley Davis, Ethan Hooker, Jerenzo Julius, Hakeem Kunene, Lily Bester, Jean Smith. All of them will integrate our senior squad. And those are all players that come through our youth structures from maybe out of town when they were at school but now for the last few years been through the Sharks junior structures. And similar to Henry Jacobs, Emil van Heerden, and Corné Roll, they all come through this pipeline. So the pipeline, I believe, is healthy. But there is this perception, and I think we'll have to the only way we can change it is by proving it wrong on the field.
I know culture is a big thing for you, and heritage is big for you. When you identify a position that you need to fill, and you maybe highlight or try to identify an elite player or a marquee player, how big a role does that play? In identifying that player, and how difficult is it to get that person to embrace what the Sharks is about? Yeah. Because obviously they come with an established brand, as it were. Yeah,
and I think where maybe it's different to previous years, but a player joining the Sharks is pretty much a job interview. This is the organisation, this is what we stand for. These are our values on inclusivity, diversity, high performance. These are going to be your line managers, John Plumtree, Neil Powell, and this is the culture of the organisation. If you can tick all those boxes and they're happy with you, then it becomes a commercial negotiation where I get involved. But you've got to understand exactly what we're about at the Sharks, because for some people it's great, other people might not see them in that culture. So, but that's the wonderful thing about professional sport and team and organizational culture. Sometimes you're going to have a really, really talented individual that's not going to come to you because it doesn't fit the organizational culture. And for us, it's more important, and we share that really strongly between myself, Neil, and Plum, is that the fit of the individual needs to be really, really good for the Sharks.
Have you faced any particular challenges in recruitment, given how unfortunate this region has been over the last few years, whether it's natural disasters or other events? have you had to convince players that this is the right destination for them?
Listen, it's been a really tough time for a lot of South Africans with COVID, macroeconomic environment in the country. So some players do lean to overseas contracts. But, and then the additional issues we had in KZN with the riots, the unrest in 2021 and the subsequent flooding did amplify the problem. But it also gives us opportunity to become more relevant in our communities and in our environment where we exist. So some people who join the Sharks have those values and they maybe resonate with that because we tell them what we're about, and that'll actually attract them here because they've got a social responsibility. Some of them feel that they have, and you look at a Lucanio and Mapimpi, they're from neighbouring province, Eastern Cape, but you've got Pepsi Buthelezi is from Shishluyo. Being at the Sharks, he could impact his family. We could go and deliver food to his community. Fez and Bata, we could actually go and help his community. And I think that helps players to commit here because they're actually aligned with our vision and our values.
I was going to say, because that part of it is I know is quite important to you and reaching out to the communities, especially in KZN. Just in terms of that, how do you think rugby plays a big enough a part in the surrounding communities, especially given our unique challenges here in South Africa and especially in KZN?
Yes. Listen, I think first and foremost, we are a high-performance rugby franchise, and we must never steer clear from that. But our values leans us towards a social responsibility of inclusivity and diversity. And I think that if you take that and you live both sides of high performance and your social responsibility, it's important to understand that rugby or no individual or no country or no organisation can ever fix inequality, racism or poverty. But we can impact our organisation that can maybe impact our little environment that we operate in, our city, our province, and hopefully, eventually be a shining light to the nation. So it's not that we want to fix this because these are unfortunately global problems, a lot of them. But if we can make a really tangible difference in our communities' lives, then it's something that we're passionate about.
As much as you're rooted here and this is home and, that you do it for the community, you've also, over the last few years, especially with the new owners, made the point that you're happy to spread your wings and spread the gospel and take the Sharks brand globally. Tell us about those successes because the Sharks brand is out there.
Yeah, listen, it's really a big driver, and it has always been a seed that was planted at the Sharks, that we were not a disruptive brand in the rugby space, but we were someone a brand who tried to push boundaries. And I think now with the MVM ownership investment, it's just been empowered a little bit more, where we really have got a strong ambition and drive to go into Europe because that's where we're playing. I think there's a lot of expats, a lot of ex-Shark supporters that live in territories in the UK and, like where we're currently playing. So we've intentional about trying to push our brand into those areas. And how we're going to do it, social media is the easiest way to do that. And we've got combined through our platforms the biggest social media presence of any club in world rugby. I think Toulouse pips us every now and then, but now we snuck past them with a growth in Instagram and Facebook over the last month or so. But I think that given our on-field performance is really something that we're proud of, that we can see that the brand, when we get that when we get that on-field success right and we become sustainably successful, I think that the platform's there for us to really build on that brand ambition that we've got.
Bulls coach Jake White was on our pod a couple of months ago. I think we asked him quite bluntly whether he thought within the next couple of years a South African franchise could have success in the European Cup or the Champions Cup, and he said bluntly no. Until we have all our players playing in South Africa, etc., we won't be able to compete against the Galacticos of Toulouse and La Rochelle, etc. Do you share the same view?
I've got an immense amount of respect for Jake, and and I've learned as a player playing under him, I won't go against what he's saying. But I agree now, at the current state, I don't think we will. But if we tweak some season alignment issues, I think we can. And the obvious one is we're playing an international Southern Hemisphere season and a club Northern Hemisphere season. So there's no rest period for players, which not good for player welfare. It's not good for squad makeup, and I think that's what's our big stumbling block at the moment. Where until we fix that, it'll be very tough for us. I mean, Super Rugby was already a challenge to play in, but we made 1, maybe 2 trips overseas. Last year, the Sharks travelled 8 times into the Northern Hemisphere. Where is that sustainable? No, I don't think it is. Will we be successful in winning a competition? You only do it if you receive a home semi-final, and already those are European-based semi-final and final. So, a lot of those things will need to be changed. I know there's greater macro discussions around World Club Cups and all these things. So let's see where World Rugby is going to go with this. But I think in the current environment, it'll be tough.
Curveball question. If you could change one thing in SA Rugby right now, what would you do? What would you change?
I think I would, and I mean, this is maybe a pie in the sky and a bit of a philosophic view, but I would love to change the level of trust that there is currently in South African rugby. I think there's a air of pessimism around. No one trusts anyone. I think there's discussions happening that people feel they're not included. Other people feel they shouldn't be included, or they shouldn't do this or that. And I think we all, at the end, want the same result. We all want a national team that's sustainably successful like we currently are, but we also want a pipeline that's healthy and people to be proud of every aspect of South African rugby. And currently I feel, and I might be totally wrong, but there is a level of mistrust and pessimism in the rugby environment, which is not, in my opinion, conducive for growth and growth potential, I suppose.
The cynic in me would say that's how it's always been, from Dr. Late's days to now. Will it ever change?
Well, I think since Dr. Late's days, if we can go back, then the sport was amateur and we didn't have the same challenges. Now we in a macroeconomic environment where we're on the back foot in terms of our currency, we've got a relative cheap labour cost compared to, so we've got positives, we've also got negatives. We've got clubs trying to take our best players. We've got this overlap in international versus club season. So it's a different environment. So if we can't fix it, I don't think we'll ever be able to, like we spoke about 1 point losses and 1 point wins. And I think, we've had the 1 point wins in the last World Cup. If we don't have it in the next World Cup and we haven't fixed this thing, maybe it would be a different result, and that can spiral an industry into a different way of thinking and operating. So I think now we had a very crucial crossroads in the sport, and not just in South Africa, but I suppose globally. But the decisions we make now, I believe, will put us on a path and a trajectory going forward. But I would like to see the trust come back into the sport.
Given all the things that we've mentioned now, how exciting or how enthused are you about doing the job that you are doing? Because sometimes people do a job and everything runs smoothly. But obviously in your job and in the environment that you operate, there are distinct challenges.
Yeah, listen, I think I love working in sport. I love working for this ownership group. I think they've got a really big global vision in where they want to take rugby, the Sharks. There's also interest in other sports. So that excites you about a bigger picture. Focusing on the Sharks, I think that's the same. The Sharks is a sporting franchise like the Milwaukee Bucks, like the Florida Panthers. You're going to go through ups and downs, and you're going to have tough seasons and good seasons. So if you have a process and you follow the right process and you trust the people and you stick to your values and your culture, then I think it's, even though it will always be tough to be in this situation like we are now, for instance, in the URC, when you get through it, the way you treat each other when the chips are down and, the 1 point losses go against you, it'll shape the way people respect each other going onwards and forward. So I think, strangely enough, and when you're in that moment, you feel alone and you feel like, the world's against you, might be probably the best thing that could ever happen to a franchise if you have a long-term view, because that just vindicates the decision of the people that's in the organization. Because not once in this tough time where we've gone through has anyone, gone against the system, has anyone questioned people's integrity or motivations. And I think that is just a sign of the people that we got involved here, which is a positive.
Part of our pod every single time is we talk about not just rugby, but wine as well. We had Mark on the other day, and obviously he punted your board member and sponsor, Ken Forrester. So I'm going to ask you, not even though he makes wonderful wines, I'm going to ask you, when you sit down and end of the day and there's been floods in KZN or riots, and you finally get home, your wife and your kids, and you sit back and you open a bottle of wine, what do you open?
So I'm not allowed to open a Ken Forrester renegade then, and I'm just joking. Listen, I think... It was quite ironic that the first bottle of wine we grabbed was a Babylon's Tour in Babel, because we were in this space of confusion and it was a bit like the biblical floods and unrest and everything. So I said to my wife, is there another one? Because I think we need to carry on drinking the Babel.
It could have been the Alice Verloren. So I mean,
thank goodness it wasn't that. We weren't there yet. We were just a little bit confused, so we focused on the Babel.
And just in terms of that, I mean, I know rugby. We're sitting here. Full disclosure, we're sitting having a beer at the moment. So we shouldn't. We're talking wine though, just generally, how have the players been in terms of the Ken Forrester? I know there's a bit of a mentorship there involved as well, and just having a wine guy as a sponsor must be quite lekker.
Yeah, listen, I think the players when I played compared to the players now is a total different animal. Yeah, we used to. As soon as a beer opened, guys would sing, and then I would down it and put it on his head, and now the guys are twirling glasses and looking for the legs of the wine and all that. So it's a different animal that we're dealing with. But yeah, the players enjoy that. And, I think the nice thing about the play development system that you're actually referring to, where Ken's one of the mentors, is a player with a real passion for wine can now speak to one of the best winemakers in the world and have access to him. And that person on the other side is actually happy to deal with this player. So I think that's a huge privilege that this ownership group brings to our players, which they'll only realize one day when it's past.
I think it's been quite good. I don't know, Liam, do you have anything more? Should we get down to some serious, maybe find a bottle of wine and open it?
I think we should, and I suppose it's better to have a wine sponsor than a sponsor like, say, Drive Shaft Centre, which sponsored a club in Cape Town many years ago. I don't know how you would benefit as a player, but anyway, that's just my functions with.
Doesn't everybody need a drive shaft changed at some point? Maybe we should just leave it there. Anyway, that's our pod. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brenden and Liam. This is Liam Com. Next, Liam Delcom. Sorry, I almost butchered his surname there.
You did.
Anyway, thank you, Ed Coetzee, for being with us, and good luck. You got quite a challenge on your hands.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening, and a reminder, you can find all the To The Last Drop podcasts on the Brenden Nell YouTube channel, iono.fm, Spotify, Player.fm, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, and iTunes, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts.